Hey there, welcome to another episode of Texas Todd Barbecue. Today, I'm going to show you how to make ribs in the oven. Let's go check it out. Thanks for checking out my oven ribs video, and the first thing I like to do is wet down a paper towel and wring it out. Then you'll go over to your cutting board and place it beneath the cutting board. Keeps it stable. Keeps it from sliding around so you don't injure yourself when you're cutting. Alright, and next I put the glove in my left hand. I'm going to use this one to carry the meat and to move it around. And then I'll keep my right hand dry so I can use it for the knife. So one wet hand and one dry hand. Alright, now that we got our glove ready to go, first thing I always like to do is flip around the backside there. And there's that piece of meat in the middle called the skirt. Sometimes it's on, sometimes it's off. If they're on, just go ahead and lift this piece of meat up and guide the blade along the base of the ribs until you cut all the way through. And here we go. Alright, and next the breastbone, you're going to grab it here and pull up and then cut through. And if you hit something, just go down a little bit until you cut all the way through. Alright, next I like to square up the ribs, so I'll just find this top piece of meat here and cut straight across. It makes the ribs cook nice and even and it looks nice. Now that we got the top part cut off, I like to square up the ribs all around just to make the entire thing square. I'll kind of push out the sides just to get rid of any loose hanging meat, just to make it nice and even. And then I like to kind of feel around, make sure nothing's poking out around the edges. Next, I'm going to show you how to pull out the membrane. Some people like to pull it off, some leave it on, some like to score it. I've always just pulled it off. It definitely makes for tender ribs. So the first thing I do is grab a butter knife and I'll kind of put it underneath the membrane and kind of pull up. I typically do the last two just to get me some more room to pull it off. So put the knife under, kind of wiggle it through till you get a little piece of it up. I always like to use paper towels. It just helps with the better grip. And since I'm right-handed, I flip it over and I grab it here with the paper towels, and I also pull up towards the top of the ribs. It kind of helps so you can try to get it off in one clean pull. And they say that the cook is going to go based upon the membrane pull. Just kidding. Alright, now that the ribs are trimmed and prepped, now we're going to go ahead and put liquid smoke as the binder. Since we're doing these in the oven, we want a little bit of a smoke flavor, so I'll go ahead and use liquid smoke as the binder. I do this for all of my oven ribs. If I were using the offset smoker, outside, I would not use liquid smoke. I would use olive oil as my binder, but once again, since we're inside in the oven, we still want to get a little smoke flavor. So go ahead and do the front and the back and just kind of pat that in, not too heavy. And if you don't want to use it, that's fine. Alright, here's a Texas Todd tip for you. I always use a shaker. It makes for a nice even coat. So when using a seasoning, point the holes up towards you. Salt settles, so it helps get a nice even coat. So hold it up nice and high and just sprinkle it all the way through. A nice even coat on the ribs. And in the oven I use 2 water pans to help retain moisture throughout the cook. And now we'll put the ribs in the oven at 275 degrees. This is the same temperature I use in my offset smoker. It makes it nice and consistent. And we'll set the timer for 6 hours. Alright, and halfway during the cook, I like to check on the ribs, and it should have rendered out some fat by now. I like to get a brush and brush on the fat back onto the ribs. Helps retain moisture and flavor. Right, and about 5 hours in, I like to do what's called the bend test, the check for readiness. So we'll pick up the ribs and we'll kind of let them bend. And if they bend in half and break, they're overcooked. They still got a little bit of bend to them, so you want to pull them out right before they kind of break, so they got a little bit to go. Alright, so I did another bend test and they were pretty good. So if you don't want to sauce your ribs, some people sauce them, some people don't. If you don't want to sauce your ribs, you can go ahead and just put them out and let them rest. If you do want to sauce them, continue watching and I'll show you how I do the sauce. Now, if you do like barbecue sauce in your ribs, I always like to use a bottle like this. Just makes for the nice even spread. I've seen people use straight out of the bottle, and it makes a kind of a big mess. So I always like to put it into a bottle, make sure it's nice and warm, room temperature. And I also like to use a brush. Just helps with a nice even spread, a really nice presentation. So go ahead and sauce the front and the back, however little, however much you like. But once again, I always like to use a bottle just because it makes it a lot easier to control. And give it a nice once over. Good thing about barbecue sauce, you can use any type that you like. You can use a lot, you can use very little. For me, I like to use a nice light even coat, as you see here. Alright, now that they're sauced, they go back in the oven. I leave it at 275 for about 15 minutes. Some people like to broil it. I just pop it back in for about 15 minutes. Alright, now that the ribs are done, we're going to go ahead and take them out and put them on the cutting board to let them rest. I don't have a set time, I just kind of go by feel. Every 10 or 15 minutes or so, I'll kind of check it out, make sure it's nice and warm to the touch. And if there's any leftover rendered fat, I go ahead and spread that on, give it a nice deep flavor. Now that the ribs have been resting, they're nice and warm to the touch, so they're not hot, they're not cold. I like to kind of cool them down enough to where I can handle them by hand. And now we're going to go ahead and cut into the ribs. Thanks for joining me today on this episode of Oven Baked Ribs. They turned out delicious, pretty simple. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And until then, happy eating. Y'all take care. Oh yeah. Look at that.